Fretboard knowledge usually comes by drilling information. So scales, chords, triads, taking new information around the circle of fifths, like that kind of effort. There are some musical constructs that double up by both providing incredibly great insight into the construction and design of the fretboard, but also being sort of instantly musically pleasing and very fun to discover. Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today we will map diatonic sixths to the fretboard. Now, as you heard at the top, this is a familiar sound. These intervals, these wider intervals of sixths, are very familiar and pleasing. They've been used in modern music quite a bit. I'm going to explain what these are, what these intervals are, the diatonic sixths. Then I'm going to show you how to map them onto the fretboard. And importantly, I'm going to show you how to do this with information that you already know. So these intervals are not necessarily going to be something brand new you have to learn, but we're going to attach them to information that I'm 99% positive you already have, which is going to really allow you to keep these pieces of information and really allow you to use them pretty much right away. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, diatonic means of a key. So here's the A major scale. These 7 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, before you get back to the octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are the only notes in the key of A. That's sort of the fabric of the key. That makes up the key. That is the diatonic information. Any other notes you play are actually not in the key of A. So that's diatonic. Sixths are simply the sixth interval in the scale. So check this out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the interval of a sixth, right? This is the root, and this is the sixth note in the scale. So diatonic sixths really is going to be us using that interval, the interval of a sixth, and using only the notes from the key of A and mapping that interval throughout the diatonic structure. It may sound more complex than it actually is. Let me show you how it works. Okay, let's map diatonic sixths onto the fretboard. I told you we're going to attach it to information you already have, and I'm going to get to that in a second, but I want to play you 2 more examples of how these intervals are used by guitarists in popular music. So the intro to Van Morrison's Brown Eyed Girl goes like this. Those are all sixths in the key of A. Another example is Van Halen's Women in Love. Of course, I'm not using a Marshall stack. I don't have that tone, but you'll see the voicings he uses. That's the intro. The verse goes like this. Great use of sixths right there. Beautiful. 2 examples of these intervals being used by guitarists in popular music. I'll have another example of our blues progression here at the end, but let's just map them to the fretboard. How are we going to do it? How does it work? Well, we're going to use an A major bar chord just to get the methodology here together. I'm going to run through one really quick piece of information. You don't have to retain this, but I'm going to show you how this works. The interval of a sixth, notes that are 6 degrees away from each other in the scale, happens twice inside this chord. Now, I just want to show you how I get to that. If I'm going to play all the notes in the scale, starting on each one of these chord tones, we'll see if the note that's a sixth away from that tone is actually in the chord. You don't have to track too much of this, but check this out. Here's the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That note is not in this chord. When I go from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that note is in this chord. So this sixth, this degree, this interval of a sixth is inside this bar chord. Now, it only happens again, I'm going to skip over all that stuff, but it happens again from the G string to the B string. Check this out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So inside this bar chord, we have 2 expressions of the interval of a sixth. lots of numbers, right? Here's the way to clock it in case the numbers are a bit too much for you. Inside this bar chord, the notes that are on the D and G string are a sixth apart, and the notes that are on the G and E string are a sixth apart. You'll recognize this from the Beatles. So inside this bar chord again, you've got a sixth from here, A and G string, and a sixth from here, G and E string. Now, that's how you unlock the sixth in this shape. Every single bar chord has that same construction. So they all share those two shapes, those two sixth intervals inside the chord. Now, diatonically, the next chord in the key of A is B minor. There's our B minor bar chord, right? These notes are still a sixth apart, but now the shape has changed. So here's A and B minor. Check this out. And this, A major, B minor, A major, B minor. So if you think of a chord progression in the key of A, 1, 2, 3, let's just say A major, B minor, C sharp minor. Here's how the sixths look diatonically using those shapes. Fascinating. Now you can take that all the way up the key, and I've tabbed all that stuff out. Okay, I want to show you another example. Now we're going to switch to the root on the A string. Now in this construct, the interval of a sixth only happens once, and it's between the D and the B string. Just trust me on that. You can do all the math if you want, but I'm telling you, that's the way it goes. Here's our A major chord, and here's the sixth inside of it. Now if we do that same chord progression, A, B minor, C sharp minor, and we just take those notes that are on the D and B string and follow those chords up, we get that same information. And you can see, if you look at these bar chords, challenge yourself to see these shapes in these bar chords. Because that's when that information will really attach. And you'll be able to see basically that third, in other words, this is major, this is minor, minor. That third will indicate how your sixth moved from major to minor. There's a lot of information here, but just look at the shapes. Okay, I'm going to give you one more example. That's all diatonic sixths in the key of A. Now I'm going to give you one example over a blues progression. And if you don't know this already, the blues progression using seventh chords, in other words, A7, D7, E7, blues in the key of A, is actually 3 key changes. And there's a video right here that explains that. But these chords actually suggest that I'm changing keys each time I move. This is in a different key than this, and this is in a different key than the E. I'm not going to get into too much of that because that video that I just called out explains it really well. But here you've heard this kind of a thing before. What I'm about to play you is a blues progression using sixths as sort of a melodic tool, as a melodic structure. You've heard this before a million times. sixths again, using sixths as a motif to outline the 3 chord changes in a blues progression. Another fantastic use of these things. These intervals are extremely useful. They're melodic. They're really open and airy sounding because they're such a wide interval. And they're very sweet sounding because they're actually inverted thirds. But again, all this stuff, you don't need to know all this stuff. Just look for these shapes. In your major chord, same shapes on the same string. For your minor chord, root on the E string, and then look for those shapes for your major and minor bar chords with root on the A string. Put all that stuff together, really get in there and investigate it. And it'll just get into your playing immediately, and it's very, very melodic. Okay, there they are, diatonic sixths. Interesting sound, right? Very, very soft and airy and sweet sounding, these intervals. And here's why. The interval of a sixth is not a spread interval, spread being the 2 notes of the interval are outside of the same octave, but it's darn close. I mean, if you think about the octave, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the sixth is almost at the end, right? It's a wide interval. You can't express it unless you skip strings. That's how wide it is. And here's a piece of information that may not be very important now, but the sixth gets its sweet sound because it's actually an inverted third, and thirds are very sweet. Now, you don't really need to know too much about that, but if you're curious, like really dig down and sort of deconstruct that interval and look at it inverted, and you'll see that it's actually the interval of a third. And thirds are naturally very sweet sounding, whether they're major or minor. Anyway, this is already too much information. We saw those 2 examples, Van Morrison and Van Halen. Interesting how they're using the same information, but obviously completely differently. But they add that airy, sort of sweet sounding interval. I've tabbed all this stuff out. The tabs are on Patreon, and I've linked that in the description below. Head on over there if you'd like to grab them. If you like this channel and what I do resonates and you'd like to show your support, Patreon is really the best way. And if you pledge, I want to thank you in advance. That platform basically supports this entire project for me, and I really appreciate it. Okay, when I learned this construct, diatonic sixths, I immediately wrote that song that you heard at the top, and I wrote that years ago. But it's inspiring. These are inspiring because they sound so sweet, and once you get them under your fingers, they're so easy to move around. So I hope it inspires you. I hope you find this interesting. Get these under your fingers, and I hope that they sort of sneak their way into your playing, and maybe you start composing with them. I know you're going to have a good time with this. I'll see you next time.